Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Good afternoon, folks. Welcome back. Today, at the request of 2K Basketball, we will be discussing the history of USS Iowa BB-61. Iowa was powered by 8 Babcock and Wilcox boilers and drove 4 shafts, which allowed her to reach a maximum speed of 33 knots under 212,000 horsepower. The maximum range of the ship was 16,000 nautical miles at a speed of 15 knots. The armament of the Iowa class was the best of any American battleship, comprising of 9 Mark VII 16-inch 50 caliber naval rifles in 3 triple turrets, a super-firing pair forward, and a single turret aft. The main guns could fire a 2,700-pound shell, which is equivalent to the weight of a small car, 23 miles downrange. The battleship would also have 20 5-inch 38 caliber dual-purpose naval guns in 10 dual mounts, with a firing range of 14 miles. The AA armament comprised of 20 Bofors 40mm quad mounts and 49 Oerlikon 20mm dual mounts. The Iowa class of battleships were the final class of battleships constructed by the United States, coming in at 887 feet 3 inches with a beam of 108 feet 2 inches. Being designed to be as large as possible and still fit inside the Panama Canal, the Iowas weighed in at 54,889 long-ton standard displacement and 57,540 tons full-load displacement. One of the most iconic features of the Iowas was their bullnose bow, the bulb-like spear on the forward tip of the ship. The Iowa-class battleships were the longest, fastest, and most advanced of the time, only exceeded by the Japanese Yamato class of battleships. Iowa was laid down in New York Naval Shipyard in June of 1940. She was launched 2 years later on August 27, 1942. She was christened by Leo Wallace, wife of Vice President Henry Wallace. After further completion and final preparations, Iowa would enter service, being commissioned on February 22, 1943. Iowa would begin her shakedown cruise just 2 days after her commissioning on February 24, 1943. Her first combat mission was to counter the battleship Tirpitz, which was operating in Norwegian waters. She was deployed on August 27th and returned home on October 25th. In November of 1943, Iowa would ferry President Franklin D. Roosevelt to Algeria for a conference with major Allied leaders. During this cruise, many of Iowa's escorts performed combat drills in an attempt to impress the president. One of these escorts was the infamous Fletcher-class destroyer, USS William D. Porter. While the crew was performing torpedo exercises, a torpedo was accidentally fired and headed directly towards Iowa. The battleship was able to dodge the torpedo and then quickly trained her guns onto the destroyer, suspecting an assassination plot. The crew of Porter were all punished, but saved from a court-martial by the president himself. Iowa would be transferred to the Pacific Fleet in early 1944, crossing the Panama Canal on January 7th. Iowa would conduct shore bombardment on the Marshall Islands and Truk Atoll. She also carried out carrier escort operations, Iowa proving to be a highly effective unit. Her speed allowed her to keep up with carriers, and her guns being the most powerful ever put into U.S. Navy service. On February 16, 1944, Iowa and sister ship New Jersey were tasked with sinking any Japanese naval vessel that attempted to escape the island of Truk for the North Passage. 2 ships, the destroyer Mayakaze and the training ship Katori, came into range, and the 2 battleships made very quick work of the 2 IJN ships. This would be the only time in history that any Iowa class would engage in combat with an enemy warship. Iowa would perform many of the same operations throughout the rest of the war. When World War II came to a close, Iowa was preparing for an invasion of the Japanese home islands. Iowa would sail into Tokyo Bay alongside USS Missouri on August 27, 1945. Iowa was moored right next to Missouri during the signing of the surrender, and had Franklin D. Roosevelt been alive when the war ended, the treaty could very well have been signed aboard Iowa, since Franklin Roosevelt had been aboard the ship. Post-war, Iowa would conduct a handful of training missions, alongside receiving a few modernizations. In October, subject of the previous video, Nevada, was selected as a target ship for naval gun training. Iowa, alongside a destroyer and a heavy cruiser, would fire at Nevada for 4.5 days. but the old battleship would not sink. She had to be finished off by an aerial torpedo, and in 1949, Iowa was decommissioned and placed into the reserve fleet. Iowa would be reactivated for the Korean War on July 14th of 1951. She would relieve sister ship Wisconsin in April of 1952 as the flagship of Vice Admiral Robert Briscoe. Iowa would shell North Korean positions on and off for the entire month, destroying gun emplacements, supply lines, railroads, and troop concentrations. On June 9, 1952, Iowa would rescue a downed helicopter pilot from the carrier USS Princeton, and on August 20th, Iowa would admit 9 men from the destroyer USS Thompson into her hospital after the Gleaves-class ship had taken a hit from a Chinese battery. Iowa would continue to fire on enemy positions and would be rewarded the United Nations Service Medal and the Korean Service Medal for her service, firing a total of 16,689 rounds from all of her guns during the Korean War. Iowa would once again be decommissioned in February of 1958. Iowa would remain in the mothball fleet for 24 years. Then, in 1982, as a result of Ronald Reagan's 600-ship Navy program, Iowa would be reactivated once again. The battleship was quite out of date by this time and was brought to Avondale Shipyard in New Orleans, Louisiana for a massive overhaul. All of the ship's original AA armament was removed, alongside 2 5-inch mounts per side, located amidships. She would then be towed into Ingalls Shipbuilding in Mississippi to complete her modernization. Iowa was armed with some of the best naval weaponry available at the time, including Harpoon anti-ship missiles, Tomahawk cruise missiles, and Phalanx Sea Whiz guns. Iowa would also receive a helipad, remote-controlled drones, and improved firing control systems. However, the primary director for the main battery, original to the battleship, proved to be so accurate and precise that the Navy decided to leave it in place instead of installing a new system. Iowa would not participate in any wars or combat operations during this time. She would only conduct training cruises, escort operations, and displays of power around the world. Iowa would suffer the biggest tragedy of her history on April 19, 1989. During a gunnery training exercise, a massive explosion suddenly occurred inside of the No. 2 turret. Flooding, as a result of the explosion, likely saved the battleship from further damage. However, the explosion killed 47 crewmen, which was every single man inside that main turret. After repairs, Iowa would be decommissioned for the final time in October of 1990. She was decommissioned earlier than planned as a result of the explosion. Iowa would join the reserve fleet in 2001 and was officially struck from the Naval Register in 2006. There she would remain until 2011. Iowa would become the final battleship in the world to open as a museum ship when she was purchased, repaired, and relocated by the Pacific Battleship Center at a price of $5 million. After preparations, Iowa was towed to her permanent home in Los Angeles, California, passing under the Golden Gate Bridge along the way. There she remains today, as a museum for all to see. I gave this video the title of The First and the Last because Iowa was the first of the Iowa class to be built and the final battleship in history to be saved as a museum. The Iowa presents herself as a Tech Tree Tier 7 battleship in World of Warships Legends, and is a very popular choice among players. Sporting powerful guns, a good AA complement, and a high speed, there is no question as to why. Iowa was my first Tier 7 ship, and I highly recommend her. Since Iowa is a museum ship, I gave her, and all of my museum ships in-game, the Memorial Day 21 flag. Seeing as there's some time left in this video, I'll leave you guys to watch the rest, and I'll see you in the outro. Also, shout out to Exiflex and my brother Airbreak for joining me in this match as division mates. They both have YouTube channels of their own and should be in the comments section if you want to check them out.
Our victory is in sight. Spotted!
Seeing that we've reached the end of the gameplay, I'd like to thank you all for watching and making it this far in. As per usual, the next video will be made at the very first request I see in the comments section. That comment will be pinned, and I will do research on that ship for the next video. Thanks again so much for watching and for the support for these videos. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.